Welcome back, literary slummers, to another episode of HateRead. I'm Anna.
And I'm Em. And this is not just another episode of HateRead, it is the final episode of HateRead. Well, sort of. This is the last episode of...
Don't freak
out. If you didn't listen to our announcement last week, go listen to that. But this is the last episode of HateRead proper before we get into our Slummer reading this summer. And following that, we will be rebranding this late summer, early fall.
Yes.
So, as it is the end of an era, as everyone must do at the end of an era, we thought that the proper way to send up this old format was to have a little superlatives awards show, I guess.
As we go on, we remember all the times we read together.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, it's been a long and winding road. So we've got 10 categories that we're going to go through, and both Anna and I have picked an award recipient, I guess, for each category.
Yeah. A winner.
A winner. Well, some of them are winners. I didn't want to call them all winners because some of these categories aren't very...
Oh, that's true.
They aren't ones you'd want to write your mom about.
Unless she also likes bad books.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we're going to go through, and each of us is going to pick a recipient for all the categories and discuss a little bit and have a nice, relaxing trip down memory lane here.
La 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 la.
And I think we'll probably have posted like what the categories are on our Twitter before this. If you guys want to have picked out your top picks for, if just based on your past listening, what you think we're gonna, I don't know, make like a drinking game out of it. No, don't do that. That's irresponsible.
Do that. What?
All right. So to get us started off, our first category, pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. Best written. Which book did you think was the, maybe you still hated it, maybe you didn't, but it was not poorly written. In fact, you may even say the prose was generally good.
My pick for this one, and it wasn't like, it's definitely not the best written of the books we've read, but to my personal taste, which I guess that's what this list is all about,
sure.
To my personal taste, was An Anonymous Girl.
Oh my gosh, that was one of my runner-ups.
I think, and okay, technically I think only half of this book succeeds in
Sure.
this category, because I'm talking specifically about the chapters told from the point of view of Dr. Shields, which were told in second person, which I get is not everyone's jam. Like that, it's kind of a weird thing to read, especially when you're not expecting it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super creepy. It really gave you like an interesting perspective into the story, and if it had ended better, like those chapters of this book would have really made this not a hate read for me at all whatsoever.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it was definitely one of those ones that it was just the one thing there, and there were a lot of those that like it was just kind of the ending, or it was just one thing that really like took this from a book that I could have enjoyed into something that was hot garbo.
Yes.
And yeah, I thought that the second person chapters were really interesting, and I think overall the book was pretty well written. Even the chapters that weren't second person I thought were pretty solid in terms of just
whatever that girl's name was.
Jessica? She was anonymous, who knows.
Jessica.
But yeah, I think that's a solid pick. My pick for best written would actually probably be my well, I'm not gonna say that because whatever.
That's an upcoming category.
It's an upcoming category, but Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. I think this really shouldn't shock anyone. This was the one book that me and Anna were pretty much agreed on that we both really liked.
We loved it.
It was great. It turned me around completely on Terry Pratchett. Prior to this, I had
thank God
always had trouble reading Terry Pratchett books. I have conquered that fear.
Rough patch in our friendship.
Yes.
The fact that you didn't like Terry Pratchett was really problematic for me.
It was a great book. It was really good. I still super recommend it to anyone who is into fantasy or like just good writing, I guess. I don't know.
Christmas.
Or Christmas, you know, if you need a Christmas book to read. But yeah, that was my pick for best written.
Yeah, Terry Pratchett's writing, like, it takes a minute maybe to get used to, but that's just because he has so many like inside jokes with himself. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely one of those books that I read it and I was like, I went to do this for a living. I went to write books like this.
Right. It's one of those books that like you read and you get depressed because you're like, I'm never going to be that good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in that sense, I hated it.
Made me hate myself. Oh.
The worst hate of all.
All right. So our next category is one that is probably hard for us to narrow down because a lot of the books we read were very much so this.
Yes.
But what was, out of all of the 39 books that we've read, the one that was most problematic to you? Which one had the most nastiness?
Like you said, this was a super tough category because there were a lot of strong contenders.
Very much so.
And it got to the point where I was kind of like, well, is it worse to be like really sexist or is it worse to be really racist? And that was just kind of like a call I didn't want to make.
Oh my God, I think we picked the same one.
So I kind of went in a different direction.
Did we pick the same one?
I don't know, maybe. I thought I would pick one that I think is the most problematic because of its target audience.
So we picked the same book!
Because did we? This is so funny. I picked Blood and Chocolate by Annette Curtis Klaus.
We picked different books.
No, we didn't? Okay.
False alarm!
I picked Blood and Chocolate. I picked Blood and Chocolate by Annette Curtis Klaus because the thing that we found problematic in that was that it was a relationship between a guy in his like mid-20s and a girl who is, I think, 15. And that is gross and creepy and wrong, as we have said on this podcast many times. Don't date teenagers unless you are a teenager. And this book is targeted at teenagers. And it was also one of our Rewind books. And it was one that I read as a teen and did not pick up on the creepiness of it. And I think that's kind of why I was like, okay, it's the most problematic, because it's like, it is this problematic thing of like inappropriate relationships between people of different ages. And it definitely, to the target audience who is that kind of group, it might not seem like a problem. So I think that's kind of why I picked it as being the most problematic, because I think I think there are other books we've read that definitely have issues that are maybe bigger, like I said, racism, sexism, that sort of thing. But I think that the people reading it, like I as a woman reading like Legally Blonde, I might pick up on the things that were sexist in that book. And I would be like, okay, this is stupid, but I don't know that teenagers would necessarily pick up on the creepiness in Blood and Chocolate. That was true. Kind of why I picked it.
It needs like the book equivalent of a Surgeon General's warning. Like, if you read this book, you may accidentally romanticize an inappropriate relationship. Do not do that. It could be hazardous to your health.
Like, don't date 20-year-olds. Like,
if we ever get merch, we should make stickers that are like that kind of like Surgeon General's warning book.
Yes.
And you can stick them on any book that you think it applies to.
That you own. Please don't go around sticking stickers.
Don't go to the library or
like the library. Like, that's very rude. Don't do that. Librarians are trying hard enough. You don't need to make.
Feel free to leave Post-it notes in library books.
Yeah, Post-it notes are fine.
I one time went to the library and got a Post-it note in my library book that was like, don't read the foreword because it's going to spoil the following short stories for you. And I was like, wow, that was really nice. And it's like such perfect old lady cursive too. I was like, wow, you did me a solid, Edith. Thank you.
Looking out for your friends. Thanks, Edith.
Thanks.
All right, so what was yours?
Oh, mine was Annie's Baby. I totally thought that's where you're going to go.
But yeah.
Same kind of deal, like targeting like the young and formative minds of impressionable minds, I should say, not formative. Young and impressionable minds of teenagers who maybe find themselves in this situation and feel like they have no options. And yes, like it tried to do some things, like it tried to promote awareness about postpartum depression, and it tried to promote some options for pregnant teenagers, but also it came with a lot of shame and a lot of just like general nastiness and classist ideas and good time slime. Not a
Good
great
time
read.
slime. No, it super wasn't. Yeah, and I think like it can kind of seem like we're being sort of oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not patriarchal, but like paternal, with this kind of category right now. But I don't know. Like I said, in the case of Blood and Chocolate, like that is one that I read as a teenager, and I had a completely different read of it as a teenager than I do as an adult looking back on it now. So I mean, like, I'm not trying to say like teens are dumb and can't figure stuff out or anything like that, but I do think that these books present things in a certain way.
Yes.
That if you maybe haven't, had more life experience, you might kind of start thinking, okay, well, maybe that is the way the world is.
Yeah, maybe that is normal.
It might make you, or it might encourage you to make decisions that aren't the best. And I think that at its heart is the most problematic thing, is when it has like real world outcomes.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and especially too, like, in a community like, because Annie's Baby is basically like low-key religious propaganda, right?
Sure.
Like, if that's all of the reading material you're given, then I think that just does so much more harm than,
Moving on from that into a more positive category. Mr. or Miss Congeniality, or which character would you most want to hang out with or have a drink with? Who would you like to spend time with the most out of these books?
I chose maybe a weird answer, but I don't think so. Death from Hogfather.
Oh, no, I don't think that's a weird answer at all.
Thank you. He'd have so many great stories, right? Like, you would...
Yeah,
and he
for
has
sure.
Such a dry sense of humor. It's wonderful.
See, I was 100% going to pick Susan from Hogfather, but I'd already burned my Hogfather card, so I can't. But yeah, I super agree. I thought of Death, too, that, like, he's very entertaining as a character, but he's not mean.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems like a good dude that you'd want to hang out with and, like, grab a drink with, like...
Exactly. And maybe, like, if you became his best friend and got on his good side, he would just let you become immortal, and that sounds awesome.
Right, for sure.
Sounds like it would never be boring, especially if you got to be like his assistant, or whatever. You could be like Susan Light or something. I don't know. How about you? Who are you drinking with? Who's your drinking buddy?
So mine, I had some real trouble with this category. I didn't want to pick like a minor character, or even like I wanted to pick a main character, right? Because I thought it would be kind of cheating to be like, oh, I wanted to hang out with that snowman from Christmas Shoes, like
yes.
So I looked through the whole list like 8 times, and there were some from other books that I'm gonna mention that are in other categories that I was like, oh, I might want to hang out with that character, but like I said, they fit other categories better, so I didn't pick that. So the one I ended up with is, and part of this is because I feel like she's kind of an old friend, Anita Blake from Kiss the Dead.
Now hold on, are you drinking at one of Jean-Claude's many establishments?
Oh, of course.
Okay, perfect. Bring your geometric sweater.
This is my thought. First off, as buck wild as those books are, I think Anita Blake knows how to get rowdy, so I think she would be fun to drink with.
Definitely.
And I think kind of the main issue that we had with Anita Blake as a character is that she's OP and that she's a little self-righteous, right? But that's kind of like the miscongeniality, right? Like, they're really, really good at everything. Like, they check all the boxes in theory, right? Like, and I think that's kind of Anita Blake, right? Like, she's very...
Yes.
She's on paper, and I'm dancing around the word Mary Sue because there's been a lot of, heat around that word recently. And, But yeah, I think she would be maybe not someone I'd want to be best friends with for all time, but she's got a lot of cool stories to tell, and she's got a lot of hot guys around and some hot girls. So, like, she brings a lot to the party.
You know, and if you weren't turned off by it, I'm sure with very little influence, she would definitely have sex with you. So that could be a plus.
I think so.
I don't know.
Just, I don't know. I think I would feel kind of icky about that, because isn't her whole thing that she, like, has to have sex to feed her sex monster self or something? Isn't that her deal at this point in the series?
That's true.
So I don't know if I feel like you can't get clear consent at that point, really. Like, it's all sex monster, you know?
Unless you became like a were-rat or something, or I don't know. What would you like to become? A were?
Oh, gosh.
Pony? I don't know.
I definitely would not want to be a were pony. Number one. I'm a little worried now that you want to be a were pony.
No, never.
That's the first thing that came to mind. Let's leave the question
I'm just like spitballing here.
Let's leave the question of our personas for another episode, like perhaps one of the Animorphs episodes that are coming up.
Okay, now moving on to the next category. Speaking of personas, I guess. What was your worst dressed book? Had like the worst cover and or title?
I realize this is kind of a weird category. I was the one who came up with most of the categories, and some of them I came up with a very specific book in mind. And this was one of those. The book I think had the most atrocious cover was Save the Pearls by Victoria Foyt.
What was awful about that?
I don't know. Maybe it was the blackface.
Oh, shit.
Oh, dang it. It was... It's kind of interesting that I'm pulling it for this category, because we discussed in that episode there was a lot of backlash against the book, and Victoria Foyt came out later and said people were judging a book by its cover. I'm kind of okay with that in this case. Number one, I think 100%. The cover pretty much accurately reflects the shittiness of the book, so it's fine if you want to judge it by its cover. And also the cover is very, very, very bad. It does depict a white girl in half black face. And
it's not a good look.
Like, even if everything in that book worked and landed and it wasn't racist, which, spoiler alert, it is, I just don't know why you would ever think that that's a good idea to publish a book with a girl in blackface. Like, I don't understand. Like, even if there's sci-fi fantasy reasons that she's putting black makeup all over her face, like, I don't know, go a little more conceptual with the cover. Like, you have options.
Just put a panther on there, a jaguar, excuse me.
Right. I think there is a panther somewhere on that cover. I can't remember. I don't know if I said this when we recorded that episode, but like, when I was reading that book, it was one of the only books we had that I had the physical book in front of me. And I was walking around downtown with that book, like, on a stack of stuff, because I was, like, working on reading it throughout the day. And before I got in my car, I was like, I should take the cover off this book, right? Like, so
but when you do,
I 100% left the dust jacket in my car, because I was just like, I can't walk around with this.
But the naked hardcover has some spooky ass eyes on it.
Well, that's fine. Like, I can deal with spooky ass eyes.
I guess that is better than blackface.
Yeah, I mean, just a little. How about you? What do you think is the worst cover of the bunch, or title?
I think for both, the worst cover and title. For me, well, it was Slave the Pearls, but I have that for another category. So, but my answer for this question is Blood and Chocolate by Annette Curtis Klaus. What is the chocolate in Blood and Chocolate?
You know, that's a good question. I can't remember if they ever address it in the book.
Like, am I stupid, or just make no sense? Like, the blood, okay, I get it. Werewolves, meat boys, whatever. I can get behind the blood in a werewolf book. What the fuck's the chocolate? Dogs can't eat chocolate.
I was gonna say, is it just because they turn into wolves and chocolate is bad? I think maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe she references at some point in relation to her meat boy boyfriend that he's like sweet like chocolate or something. There might be something like that in one of their like relationshipy scenes. It might be a metaphor. I don't think the phrase blood and chocolate is ever used, but I think it's supposed to be like metaphorical. The blood is like, ooh, I'm gonna be a werewolf and therefore bite people and get blood in my mouth, or the chocolate is like, I'm gonna be a regular person and eat fucking candy. Like, I think that's maybe what's
so it should have been blood or chocolate.
It really should have been, but she's trying to merge the two. She's trying to be a wolf, which is bloody mouthed, and a little girl who's chocolate mouthed,
who likes chocolate.
Shouldn't be fucking 23-year-olds.
It sounds like a book about PMS is what it sounds like.
It does.
Well, the cover is also super fug. I hated it.
Now, I think the cover of the Kindle edition is different from the original cover. But as someone who owned the original cover, I can confirm both were fug.
Yeah, because you got like the nasty like 90s. Didn't it come out in the 90s?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. 80s or 90s. Late 80s. Yeah. 90s maybe.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that grungy, like, here are all of our earth tone sort of cover. Yeah. And then the Kindle edition is like very blue sky and very green grass. It's like this girl running, and then like the smear of blood in the shape of a wolf is very dumb.
It's like a crayon drawing almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Am I misremembering it?
Her crayon drawing in the magazine or whatever.
Oh, maybe that is what it's supposed to be. I mean, if that's the case, it's not good. It's not good. That guy shouldn't have gotten so hyped about it. Moving on from worst dressed, cutest couple, which and this is pretty broad. You can pick either a couple that exists in these books and you thought was,
which I didn't do.
Which you didn't do. I didn't either. A romantic couple that exists already in these books that you thought was a good ship, or if you would like to pitch either a ship that is within a book or maybe a crossover ship between two books. Yes. The world is your oyster. What do you got for us? Cutest couple.
All right, I got two.
I've got two also, but I already mentioned one of the characters in another category, so I'm going to focus on the other one.
I'm going to mention one of the characters in another category. Okay. I'm just still going to say it, though, because it's very good.
Go for it.
Well, okay, so let me do the first one that's unrelated to anything. You have to follow me on this one a little bit.
Okay.
But
I'm ready.
Willy Wonka...
All right.
And whoever the main character was from Moon People. Because
I see where you're going immediately.
Yes, I want them to get a space together in the Great Glass Elevator.
I don't have to follow you anywhere. You've opened the doors to the Great Glass Elevator, and there I am standing there ready.
You're ready to lead the way to the Vicious Knids and whatever the aliens were from Moon People.
Yes.
You're gonna bring their hands together.
Yeah.
And then give them some alone time.
Excellent ship. That is a very good ship.
It just they're just both so
much sense. Yes.
They seem to not understand anything about normal humans.
Nope.
One of them is possibly immortal.
Both of them could be immortal.
Yeah, we don't know. I don't even remember what his name was.
Neither do I. Shit. Like, most of them I remember. I can't... It wasn't Dale. That was the name of the author. It might as well have been Dale.
It might as well have been Dale. I don't know. Tweet at us.
Okay, do you want me to give you my first perspective ship, or do you want to do both of yours? Okay.
No, I want you to give me your other one.
All right. I'm going to keep this one short. It's a character I've already used, but how do you feel about Vampire Darcy and Anita Blake?
Oh my gosh.
I am, of course, referring to Vampire Darcy. She would totally
love the aesthetic.
Yes. From Mr. Darcy Vampire and Anita Blake from Kiss the Dead. I think that
I love it.
One of the problems we had with that book, Mr. Darcy Vampire, was that the romance seemed like completely not there. And the Elizabeth that was the Elizabeth in that book was a little bit of a fuddy-duddy and not very interesting. And I think that Vampire Darcy
And way
really
too
needs
pretty.
someone who can take him on adventures and not diss his vampire side quite, harsh his buzz quite so much as Anita Blake does, or as
Yes.
Elizabeth does. And I think the answer to that might be that he joins Anita Blake's harem.
Anita Blake would accept him as a vampire. No need to become human again.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, she'd
100%.
prefer if they weren't.
Yeah. And we hated that he became a human at the end of that. So I think
That was so fucking stupid.
that's my fix-it fic.
I love it. Please write it. I want to read it. 100%. Now, wait, would Anita Blake go back in time to the 1800s, or would Mr. Darcy just continue to live until he got to Anita Blake?
Yeah, I'm picturing more like Mr. Darcy realizes Elizabeth is a big fuddy-duddy, or maybe she dies. Maybe she dies tragically. Ooh, that's good.
Mm-hmm,
She dies tragically instead of him saving her, and then
yeah, she drowns. Perfect.
Yeah, and then he lives on for another however long, 150 years, whatever, 200. How long ago was Pride and Prejudice? I don't know.
Was it 1890s? I don't know.
Something.
Know. Don't ask me.
Who knows what time is? He lives on, and then he is like a vampire in one of the courts of the many vampire courts that Anita Blake has to fucking deal with because there's all the drama. And I don't know, maybe he's like friends with Jean-Claude or something, and they introduce him to Anita Blake, and she's like, yes, let's fuck. And she fucks his sadness away.
Would she also have sex with Georgina? Would she complete the set?
You know,
gotta feed that sex monster.
Feel like I want to say no because like because Georgina is still in the body of a young underage girl,
shit,
I believe. But I feel
Maybe
like
she
Anita
could get
Blake
with Sin.
Well, I feel like Anita Blake would say yes is the problem. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
We just won't go there then.
Yeah.
It's fine.
What was your second pitch?
My goofier one than the first one. I really like the idea of...
Wow, goofier than Willy Wonka and the guy from Moon People.
Can you imagine? I really like the idea of Old Man Shovelhands and Banjo from Hogfather just getting together, punching their way through life and love.
Sure.
Just like two guys that are too big for this world. They're the only ones that they can, like, manhandle, so...
Oh, no. Manhandle.
Well, okay, I didn't feel like that. I mean, even just, like, caressing.
I'll show you
hugging.
my manhandle.
You can't hug. When you're Old Man Shovelhands, you can't hug anybody.
You know Old Man Shovelhand's got a big old manhandle.
Oh, my God. They were just made for each other is all I got to say. What is your second one? Let's move on.
My second more serious pitch that I think would actually be a couple that I would see working out. Because I think Anita Blake and Vampire Darcy are just about the sex. Like,
obviously. Just how she is with everybody.
With everything. Everything. I mean, like...
Everything.
Every slightly animate object that crosses her path.
And some inanimate.
Yeah. Okay, so Me Before You, Lou... the main character. It's after Amelia Clarke, as portrayed in the movie. It's after the events of Me Before You. Her boyfriend, employer, charge, whatever, it's a problem, go listen to that episode, has died. And she is bereft. She's very sad because she doesn't know what to do with her life now that this man who she built her whole personality around has disappeared from her life and is gone. Very true. She feels bad about it and also probably feels guilty about, like, kind of the shithead she was if we want to have some character growth here. So she's, like, hanging out at a bar in England. Or a pub, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. And this woman walks in. And she sits down next to her, and she's like, "Oh, you look like you're sad. You're drinking alone. Do you want someone to talk to?" And Lou's like, "Yeah, I just had this whole situation, with this guy I was working for, and he passed away, and I'm like really down about it." And the woman is like, "Yeah, tell me about it. My time traveling husband just died."
Oh my God.
And it's Claire from Time Traveler's Wife, another woman
And he
who built
groomed me from a very young age.
who built her entire personality around a man. And then
Anita Blake busts down the door and says, "Let's fuck it out."
So that's my pitch.
I love it. I think these are all much better books than the ones we read.
I know, right? We should write books.
All right. So now that we've discussed love, let us discuss laughs. Who would you choose as the class clown? And by who, I mean which book, because it was so funny and not on purpose.
Was an obvious answer to me. This is one of the categories I didn't have a problem with. And it was taking it all the way back to the beginning with you. Antigua.
Oh my god, I love Antigua.
Wizards and Heroes by Denise Brown Ellis and Larry Ellis. All I could think of when trying to go through the books for this category was that time in that book where there was a scene where a fox fought a gorilla. Oh, it was so
or that time they had like a talking table that didn't have any lines.
Yes. That entire book was just the most buck wild thing I've ever read, and I can't get over it. And I think after having seen, like, we started this podcast with that book, and we were like, man, we hate this so much. I don't know if I do. I don't know if I still hate it. I think I've learned to love it.
That was me.
I like,
and I'm gonna reflect on that in another category, but yeah.
Oh no. I just really think that book, as I mean, like, it is bad, it is bonkers, it is poorly written, but man, if it isn't a journey, and if you don't get some solid laughs out of that book.
I really feel like it's like this really cool club that we're in now. We are people who have read Antigua. We survived it. We've even discussed it for an hour and a half-ish. Like, it really changed me as a person, and I think for the better.
Because I knew you, I have been changed for good. Thank you, Antigua.
Exactly.
How about you? What was your pick?
Exactly. My pick was another terrible book, Save the Pearls. And specifically any instance in which they tried to do a science. It was painfully clear that Victoria Foyt maybe had never seen science before in her life and didn't know how anything worked.
Do you mean that you can't just combine the DNA of a jaguar, an anaconda, and a golden eagle or what the fuck ever with a human and then make like a superhuman? Is that not how it works?
Yeah, no, you can't just go to like the stem cell store and just like mix a bunch of them up to come up with some superhuman concoction. No,
not even the stem cell store. By the end of that book, they were straight up going into the jungle and like picking scales off of an anaconda.
It's just like, here, just smash these up real fine and we'll inject it in your bloodstream.
Do a science.
You'll get abs like an anaconda.
I forgot about that. What a great
and
book.
then just like all of the purring and moaning and growling
yeah, it was really good on a lot of.
And still unsolved mystery of how she was riding on his shoulders or how her legs worked.
All right, well, I feel like I might know what you're gonna pick for this one, just based on kind of the last thing that we talked about. But not this one. Okay, all right. Well, I remain to see where Antigua fits into your worldview, I guess. But the next category is MVP. What was not necessarily the best book, not the best written book, but the book that added the most to the podcast?
My answer is gonna be Little House in the Big Woods.
No, that was my answer too, and I didn't think it would be yours, so I didn't pick a backup.
Yes! Yes!
Hold on, let me scroll furiously.
I just think that this episode really helps set the tone for the podcast. And
yes,
I think
100%.
For a children's book that's only a couple hundred pages long and just describes a series of chores that this girl did throughout a year of her life, There was a lot of good content there. There was a lot to explore and unwrap.
That is where Old Man Shovel Hands began, which is probably the most oft-repeated joke on this podcast.
It's my favorite.
It's 100% the episode that I tell people to go listen to if they're like, where should I start with this podcast? I'm like, go listen to Little House on the Prairie, because that's the tone.
Episode number 13, best one.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, God, now what am I going to pick? All right, well, okay. I've got one, I think.
Okay, I can't wait.
I will pick, having noted that my actual pick is 100% Little House on the Prairie, I will pick The Perfect Letter by Chris Harrison, which was the third book that we ever read, because it was the first celebrity writer we read. It was the first, like, where we weren't strictly reading it just because we'd heard it was bad or whatever, but because of kind of the mythos around it. And I think we've done a lot of books since then that kind of follow that pattern. Like we did Handbook for Mortals by Lainey Sarum. We did the kind of what we talked about with we've talked about it twice now. What is the name of it? The Save the Pearls. There was like a lot of brouhaha around that. And we've also read like the Kardashian, or not the Kardashians, the Jenners book. So I think that was the first one. And I don't think we really got into it too much in that episode. But I do think it opened the door for that sort of book to follow. So that'll be my pick for our MVP. Chris Harrison, shout out to you.
Yes, it was a good one. It was definitely, like, looking back on it, and certainly not the worst book we read, but
no, not at all.
Also very much like the type of book we wanted to read. So,
yeah.
So, we talked about what books were fun to discuss, what books were funny, what books were even, well, no, we haven't talked about, which ones were best written, not which ones were our favorite. But now, we only have to discuss which book is least likely to succeed, meaning which book failed the most at fulfilling the goals of its genre. Basically, the worst example of this type of book.
My pick for this is one that you've brought up already, and I think I'm picking this one because it fails in two genres, and that is Annie's Baby by Beatrice Sparks. Because I think you can argue that its genre is like YA lit or whatever, in which case it is boring and dumb and bad and not entertaining, so it fails as a piece of entertainment. Or you can argue that its genre is straight up fucking propaganda, in which case it fails at that too because it's not compelling propaganda.
It's no chick track.
Oh my god. We can't get into that again.
I agree. It's such a bad YA novel that the main character doesn't even sound like a YA. Like,
no, not at all.
It's very clearly an adult pretending to be a teenager, doing a very bad job.
It's made worse by the fact that we talked about this in that episode that those books are a series of books that were published by Beatrice Sparks and some other writers that were published as anonymous and purported to be actual diaries of actual teenagers.
Yes.
And it's just so not that it's like almost offensive that they think that we are that stupid that we can't tell that it's not like no one actually lived this experience, because no one has said good time slime. Yes. No one has said that.
No one has ever. Or yummy nummy. You look so yummy nummy right now.
Yikes.
Ugh. It was gross.
How about you? What was your least likely to succeed?
Maybe a little ironically, but considering the plot of the book, but Legally Blonde. Because that's a romantic comedy with no rom and no com. So what the fuck is it?
I was looking through our our catalog essentially, and I was looking at that one, and I cannot for the life of me remember that book. Like, I know we read it and I know I hated it because it was terrible, but I can't remember. Does that end with her getting back together with the guy, or like what's the?
No, but she doesn't like officially tell him she doesn't want him until the very end of the book.
Right. Okay.
But I don't think she gets with anybody at the end, but I can't remember. There was like no rom. Yeah, I think because we were like, maybe this will be the replacement for Luke in the TV show. Is it Luke? Is that his name?
No, it's Emmett.
I know Luke Wilson. It's Luke Wilson. That's the actor.
Yes, but the character's name is Emmett.
Emmett. Who will be the Luke in this book?
Yeah, it wasn't easily. Do you think maybe with that one that is a case where the genre fucked it so badly, like that if we weren't expecting it to be a rom-com, we would have liked it better, or like, I don't know. Like, what do you think?
That is a good question, because I think we are definitely like really influenced by both the movie and the musical versions that do a perfect job of making it a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
But I think if we try to think of it just as by itself, no other things related to it, it was still, it was just like soulless.
Yeah.
It was not good.
Although,
and the main character was, and maybe it was like we were supposed to read it as a satire. I don't know, but
that was kind of my thought. Like, maybe it's supposed to be satire, but I don't know. It's
didn't
hard
go
to say.
hard enough.
Yeah. Also, though, it is interesting. We're calling it least likely to succeed, but I think, except for maybe like Da Vinci Code or Ready Player One, it's probably the most successful of the books we've read in terms of like, it's been made into a movie and a musical. Like, I think there was an MTV series about like the search for the next Elle Woods on Broadway or something.
Yeah. And like, even with the plot of the book, like, someone who was not meant to succeed does succeed in law school.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
like,
That's true. Man, we're just like the people who
the
doubted
irony.
Elle.
Yeah. Isn't it ironic?
This is a very musical episode. Okay, I guess that brings us to our final two categories, the big two. The first one is Rather Be Reading, the Rather Be Reading Award. What book of all of these books, if you had to read again?
Antigua!
Antigua, really? 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 This is what you're going to come on the show and tell me, is that you want to read Antigua again?
I mean, sure, like, the obvious answer would be, like, Hogfather. I've read that 100 million times, though. So, like, Antigua.
I can't believe you've done
my
this.
deepest, darkest secret. No, I know, me either. But, okay, so it was the first time we read it, you know, we were like, this has to be the worst book ever written. But we've read so many terrible books since then. Sure. That were terrible in a lot of different ways. Yeah. That looking back on it, I don't hate Antigua anymore. I think of it fondly.
You don't hate Antigua. I think of it fondly, too. Okay, we need to pump the brakes. Because what you've just told me is that you want to read Antigua for a second time.
Yes, more than I want to read any of these other books for a second time.
I think of it fondly, too, but, like, in the way of, like, I think of my exes fondly. Like, I don't want to go back to them. But, like, yeah, it was a chill time we had. Like, that's...
But looking at all of the other books and discounting the ones I've already talked about, that is the one I think, for me, has the most rereadability. I would like to go into it with a new lens, this in the mind space of a seasoned hate reader now. Okay. And maybe I would find a lot more there to love.
Well, that'll be our 100th episode after I've died and Anna is doing the podcast alone because I'm not reading that book again.
It'll just turn into an Antigua podcast where we'll discuss it page by page because I don't think there's any chapters.
I will not be involved.
No, you'll be there. You just might not be willing.
There is a choice, and it is my choice. That is the obvious choice. Even discounting Hogfather, which, again, I've already used, so I can't do Hogfather, because I thought you would use it for this one.
Yeah, but I used it for Mr. Congeniality.
Think the obvious choice of what I would rather be reading is The Ruins by Scott Smith. Is his name Smith?
Yes.
Who knows? No way to tell.
Who knows? It is. At least according to the episode title.
That, I think, was an enjoyable book. It was full of tension and drama. It made me like a genre that I had previously sworn that I would never like a book from. Yeah, so that's my pick for Rather Be Reading. I think it deserves a lot of praise from us here on this podcast who generally shit on things. I think it was a good book.
I mean, it is a good book, but is it one I need to reread? No.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Like, you know the ending, you know how it's gonna end. So, like, same with like The Heiresses. Like, that was kind of a book that we were like, meh, it's fine.
Yeah.
You don't need to reread it because you know the ending.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's fair. Did you have any honorable mentions for this one?
Yes. My honorable mentions for this one were Dead Dog Book.
That was mine too. Dog's Purpose by W. Bruce Cameron.
And then my other one was Midnight for Charlie Bone by Jenny Nimmo, but just because I want to finish the series and see where it would end. That'd be the only reason I would reread it.
Okay. That's fair.
I think Antigua still has some hidden depths to it.
I really don't think it does. I think we pretty much plumbed those depths. They were pretty shallow. I also wanted to shout out A Dog's Purpose. I also wanted to give honorable mention to The Shadow Year, which was the most recent one we read by Hannah Ritchell. Yeah, I'm sorry, but it was another one where I hated the ending, but I liked a lot of the middle stuff.
But you would reread it?
I don't know. I'm not saying necessarily these were ones I'd rather reread. I'm just saying these are honorable mentions to things that maybe weren't as bad. Maybe things were not as dark as they seemed at the time. I also want to, especially under that one, mention Hocus Pocus by Teresa Roblin, because I think we were maybe a little unfair to that one. I think we were judging it against a ruler that it never purported to go up against. And I don't think I'd reread it, but I don't think it was as bad as it seemed at the time. And I think if it's the type of book that you're into, maybe you'd be into it.
Bring your chocolate body paint.
There was the chocolate body paint, but I think my point is mainly that I think that it was an indie writer who was going it alone, and we're holding it up against stuff like John Grisham and like Hugo Award winners like
Jimmy
Mark Clifton. And you know, fucking Pats. I think that it was fighting outside of its weight class. So I wanted to give it a shout out here in this segment.
Also, like Shades of Grey, by Clea Simon. If you like your cozy mysteries, if you like your animals plus detective sort of thing, wasn't a bad version of it.
Yeah. All right, so
y'all know we hate a lot of stuff here on this podcast, but we've hated one thing more than any of the other things that this podcast is about. So our next category is most hated book of HateRead. But we're going to start with our runners-up.
I wanted to shout out Handbook for Mortals by Lainey Sarum. I think it was absolute trash. I think that it also suffered from the whole situation around it, that it was like
scandalous.
It was a scandal. And I think to this point, I still think, having read many interviews, having listened to her talk, having like heard her explanation, I think Lainey Sarum is a scammer, and that she was trying to scam the whole YA industry, and that's just how I feel about it. So, but I didn't want to give her top spot because I don't even want to give her that.
We don't get that kind of publicity for that shit.
Right. The publicity of this podcast followed by 3 people.
Thank you so much. Never read her book.
I also wanted to shout out Moon People by Dale M. Courtney. Kind of the same sort of reasons on that one.
A delightful read.
I couldn't give it top spot because it did at least, like, I did laugh at it a lot. So, like, I didn't want to, Yes. And then I wanted to...
It did a lot of, like, really innovative things. Like naming characters after the author. And then also, like, giving other characters very similar names.
Yes. And then I also wanted to include The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, because I think I don't think it's my most hated, but I think it was kind of the most shocking for me how much I hated it, because it was one that I had read prior and didn't mind the first time around, and then I read it again and I was like, oh no, wait, So yeah, I think there was a big decrease.
Aged beautifully.
Yeah, there was a big loss in performance on that one. So I did want to give it an honorable mention. How about you? What are your honorable mentions before we get to the top spots?
So my honorable mentions are obviously Little House in the Big Woods. I hated it as a small child. I hate it today. Nothing's changed there. The Hobbit. Hated it as a young child. I still hate it today. Nothing has changed there. I'll also give a special shout out to The Time Traveler's Wife, because that's just fucking disgusting. And the thing that infuriates me about this book is that not everyone agrees with me. Some people think that this is romantic. I hate that.
That is a problem.
And then I think like one other shout out I would like to give, for a book that we didn't really talk a lot about on this
retrospective
episode, but Tortilla Flat by John Steinbeck.
Oh, yeah.
I hated it because of John Steinbeck, first of all, but also just like a white guy writing about a group of minorities in an extremely unflattering way is never a good look.
Yeah. I will say, though, I think that you were probably right not to put it as your number one, because for all of its errors, it did give us a very important gift, which is the term literary slummers, which we still use to this day.
This is true. Thank you, John Steinbeck.
Thank you, John Steinbeck, for that one thing and nothing else.
All right. Okay. So you should like definitely put like a ton of like drum rolls and really like intense, awesome music here. Like maybe the sound of trumpets blaring.
Yeah, I'm really good at putting music in the podcast. We've seen that many times. It's like a staple at this podcast.
We could do the Foley work.
No, that's for our other show.
That's the other podcast you gotta listen to, guys.
All right. Okay, so there were a lot of options for my number one most hated book of all time, or at least on this show. But I think when it came down to it, it had to be one that hit all the categories, right? It had to be poorly written. It had to be problematic.
Yes.
It had to be just plain dumb.
Yes.
And for me, no other book was that trifecta of things more than A Christmas Shoes by Donna Van Leer, because it was atrocious. It was so... I hated everything about it. The plot was garbage.
Yep.
All of the messages were garbage. It uses one of my least favorite tropes of all time as the main thing, which is a sick woman dies and makes men's life better. And it was just like the whole backstory of it, the fact that it was a book that was like written about a short story in a chicken soup book is just so unfathomable. That is
got a song and a movie and just I don't understand.
It's really bad. It's very bad, and I hated it a lot. And I think if anyone asked me today, like I've had people when I've talked about this podcast ask me like, oh, what's the worst book you've read? And I said without thinking A Christmas Shoes. So I think I also have to just go with that gut instinct.
You gotta listen to your gut. Yep.
How about you? What is your most hated book of the 39 books we've read? Which one did you find just unredeemable?
Book, the one that I could not stand the most was Rebels, City of Indra, the story of Lex and Livia and all of the
Really?
Yes.
This kind of shocks me.
It was just so,
not to say it's good.
So oh yeah, no, because I feel like, well, I've already talked about a couple of the other books because they were funnier for other categories that I might have hated more. No, I think it was a bad book in a tired genre with not like just terrible writing, stupid plot that took 200 pages to get to even. it was just so, and because I was thinking, I was like, okay, this I'm definitely going to put for the least likely to succeed. But I was like, well, no, because it does the dystopian thing. Like,
Sure.
you understand it's a dystopian YA novel.
Yeah.
It's just not a good one. It's just the worst one of them.
It's not. You're right. You are right. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think, I just feel like there were such worse books. But I do see what you're saying, that its badness was kind of distinct from, like, other factors, almost, if that makes sense. Like, it's not that it was poorly written, although it was poorly written. It's not that it was not a genre you like, although I think at this point you aren't super hyped on YA dystopia in general, but, like, I think, like, even if you like YA dystopia, and even if you're okay with, like, not great writing, like, it's still a very bad book. So, yeah, I guess I can kind of see that argument.
Yeah, it's just like the package as a whole. Because like you said, like there's some things like, okay, obviously like the time traveler's wife had a super problematic part of it, but as a whole, like, was it the worst book I ever read? Well, the writing was a little like flowery but decent, and you know, like it was a very interesting premise. Or like what was another one of my runners up here, like Little House in the Big Woods. Yeah, that is not something that I'm particularly interested in, but is it like a historical fiction that's important to the American canon? Probably. In The Hobbit, same thing. Like, it kind of jump-started the fantasy genre as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, I can't really say that that's the worst book I've ever read. But, like, what did Rebel City of Indra, the story of Lex and Livia, add to anything?
Another good point. I just don't think it's worse than Christmas Shoes.
Very fair point.
Because I would
Christmas
argue...
Shoes is a...
I would argue Christmas Shoes did add to the cultural zeitgeist, but in a negative way.
Yes, this is true. This is true.
Okay, well, I guess that wraps us up for this retrospective. Hopefully you guys had fun. Maybe if you are a newer listener, this might have given you a idea for a couple episodes you might want to go back and listen to if you haven't heard our whole back catalog.
Yeah.
And hopefully it also inspires you to stick around as we move on to this next chapter of our lives. That sounds dramatic. Of this podcast.
Same girls, same goofs, different books.
Yeah. So the next episode you guys hear is going to be our Slummer special, our Slummer reading special, which we will be doing episode 1, which we will be doing for the next 2.5 months, around that. So it's going to be the first of the Animorph series. Y'all, we are so excited to talk to you guys about this one.
So excited to talk about this one.
It's going to be a fun time.
It's so good.
But yeah, what is the name of it? The Invasion?
The Invasion.
Yeah. So Animorphs #1, The Invasion by K.A. Applegate. That will be right here on this same feed in 2 weeks' time. Yeah. Until then, you can follow us. We still have the same social media handles for now. Those will be changing at the end of the summer. So, you know, follow us now so that you can make sure you stay up to date. You can follow us on Twitter at HateReadcast. You can also email us if you have any submissions that you would like us to read in the future. HateReadcast@gmail.com. So that can be books that you guys hate. That can be books that you think are out of our comfort zone. That can be books that you think maybe are directly in our comfort zone but are niche and we haven't come across. Like anything you think we might be interested in, we are taking any and all submissions at this point. So send them in.
Yeah. If you know a lot about Animorphs, please send us in your full essays on what would be the best animal to morph into, or just like really in-depth stuff about the lore of Animorphs.
Yes.
I'd really like to hear it. As always, thank you to Ben Cope for the use of our theme song. You can find his YouTube channel in our show notes below. We are also on all of the podcasting things, so if you haven't subscribed or followed us on any of those, you definitely should, especially because it is important to know our RSS feed will stay the same. We will not be switching that over, even though the name of the podcast will be changing. So, you'll be fine to keep getting those episodes downloaded straight to your phone or whatever thing you listen to podcasts on. Your iPod Touch, do people still have those? Your Zunes? I don't know. Whatever it is you're listening to us on.
Please listen to this podcast on Zunes only.
This is a Zune-only podcast sponsored by Windows.
And while you're listening to this podcast on your Zune, please go to the iTunes store and give this podcast 5 stars. Because that does still matter.
Please download iTunes onto your Zune, onto your jailbroken Zune. Also, leave us that 5-star review on iTunes, on your computer or on your Zune, whatever it is you use to browse the internet. I'm not going to judge anymore. And also leave your 5-star reviews. Just write them down on a piece of paper and send them out into the wild for your friends, family, strangers to find.
Put it on a Post-it note in the back of one of the books that we've covered, so that people be like, "Do you hate this? Go listen to this podcast."
Oh my God, no, I love that. What did they call it? The oh, damn it. Like when you do that like underground marketing shit. What is that called?
Viral marketing?
Guerrilla marketing campaign. Edit that into one smooth sentence.
I will try my best. Or also, if you just have friends who you think would listen to this podcast, we've told you guys best episode for them to listen to, Little House on the Prairie. Send them that way. I 100% stand by that 100%. I think that's the best entry level episode into this whole mess.
Just download it onto, rip a CD with that episode on it and just hand out that HateRead mixtape to all your friends.
Just play it in your car when people are in your car with you. Trap them in your car and make them listen to this podcast you like, because that's not annoying at all.
No, and actually one of our listeners, Sam, who you know from the Hogfather episode, played Santa Claus for us, did that with a friend recently. Just trapped him in the car and made him listen to the podcast. So thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. You're the best. Oh, that's so good. All right. This is another one we don't have an author for, so how do we wrap it up?
Shit. I don't know. Why don't you just play the Animorphs theme song here? We got the rights to that.
Yeah, we definitely do. Oh, here we go. Hold on. Let me do this, because this is in the words of K.A. Applegate, somewhere up there was hope.
And it's such a poignant note to end on, because we hope you still listen to our podcast.
Exactly. You get it. We explained the joke. Now you get it.
Now you get it. Now laugh. Thank you.
Laugh. Thanks. Bye.